Welcome to Spark Sessions. I'm your host, Sonia Locke, and these girls are on fire. Today, we are incredibly honored to be joined by two extraordinary women who didn't just build a company, they ignited a movement. Liza Rodewald and Erica McManus, the visionary co-founders of Instant Team, have dedicated their lives to supporting our nation's most valued asset, our military and their families. Driven by a profound need, they turned sacrifice into innovation and brought back 70 million in wages to our military families and high-value jobs back to America. Their story embodies unwavering purpose, fierce resistance, and a deep commitment to those who serve our nation in silence. Be prepared to be inspired by these two extraordinary women who are not only sparking change, they're igniting it, one remote job at a time. From navigating the nomadic life of military spouses to building an award-winning enterprise that's empowering thousands of military families across the globe, Liza and Erica prove that when passion meets purpose, you get the force behind the force. Thank you two so much for joining us today. When we met a couple of weeks ago, as you were being recognized as EY Entrepreneur of the Year finalist for this year, I was just so inspired by your story and just knew that our listeners really wanted to hear it. So, first of all, I'd like to toast both of you to your service, to your success, and to the millions of families that you champion across the globe. Thank you so much. So before we get started talking about Instant Teams and where it's become, you guys both had a very unique and impressive career with very different paths before you guys came together. And so let's kind of look at those early sparks, like what kind of inspired you? Where did you guys come from? Did you come from military backgrounds? Like, I don't know, which one do you want to go first to kind of tell me your path?
Yeah, I can kick us off.
Okay.
Definitely was not raised in a military family, very patriotic, had grandfathers, that served. But I actually ended up meeting my spouse when we were in college. So he was in the Army ROTC program. He comes from a full line of military, all of his uncles, his dad, he was a military brat growing up. So that opportunity just to kind of see what that lifestyle was as we were dating and get really familiar with that. And ultimately, he actually proposed to me 2 weeks before 9/11 happened, which was a really interesting time to know what your life as a committed military family was going to look like.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we started. And that's where my experiences very quickly, being a military spouse and having employment challenges started right off the bat. But yeah, that's where we started.
Okay. And what was your career before you started? You were in child development?
Yep. So I actually did child development for the Army. It's programs called MWR, which is Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. So it's the Department of Defense's programs that support military families, whether it's on the installation or through a deployment. So the first 10 years, all the moves we did, I worked in those different locations running the different programs for the families on the installations. And then, as moves take you to different areas, we ended up out in California and in Silicon Valley, and that's where kind of my interests and things kind of started to take a turn.
Yeah. I want to get back to that because I know that that's a really interesting part of it. But you've been working really basically in the military side for 20 years, right?
Yep.
And now, Liza, you have a very different background.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how did you have any military background in your family?
So my dad actually was in the Air Force.
Okay.
I was born on an Air Force base, but he got out of the Air Force when I was like 2. So I really didn't live kind of the military life. So I did not know any of that until I actually became a military spouse myself. Grew up in Missouri, got a degree in computer science and loved the technology side of the house. Started my own business actually after graduating college. I was probably worked for a company about 2 to 3 years and then decided, I think I want to start my own business, start a consulting company in the software realm, be kind of my own boss and make my own schedule. Those were the pie in the sky ideas that I had at the time being an entrepreneur, and started my first company about 3-4 years out of college in the technology space.
I know that's like 3 other podcasts. I mean, like I actually want to have a whole podcast on STEM because there's not enough women in STEM, but
Yes.
you were a
Yes.
programmer before it was even cool, right?
I was, and I was working remotely before it was even a thing, because I did that right out of college. So worked for that one company, and then I've worked remote ever since. I have not gone into like a regular office in a very long time. So just I really loved the part of technology I really loved was solving problems. So when I got into computer science, I could create something that helped somebody. And that's kind of the thread that kind of stayed with me. And so I created several other businesses and then had kept my software company all through, sold one of the other pieces of technology that I'd created and done a few other things. And then met my husband, who is actually, he was active duty and then he was in the reserves. We got together when he was in the reserves. And right after we got married, he said, Liza, I think I want to go back active duty. And I was like, it was just in his blood. Like you could tell he was in 9/11. He enlisted right after all of that happened. Very patriotic. It's just, I think once they have that brotherhood bond, it's kind of hard to break that and to go do other things. And so he was really drawn to it. So I had a completely remote company. So I said, okay, let's go on an adventure. I did not know what I was signing up for, but we moved into our first military area and I learned pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, you've had multiple companies. I mean, like what kind of software or what was, I guess, your biggest software that you
So
created?
most of it was e-filing systems for the Secretary of State's offices.
Okay.
And so I did that for multiple states for broker-dealer registrations, mutual fund registrations, that regulation piece of it. So
wow.
very, very much in the regulated side of the
Kind of easy stuff. Yeah.
very long projects. It took a long time.
And back to you, you have a very creative background as well with what you were doing in Silicon Valley. Tell us a little bit about what your consulting work brought you there.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, for the first 10 years of being a military spouse, worked in those MWR military family programs. And then we did 3 moves in 3 years. I had a 4-year-old and an infant. And we ended up out in Monterey, California, which is a beautiful part of the world, but very difficult to find employment, especially with just moving so often. And so ended up connecting with an old friend of ours. You know, as military families do, you cross each other's paths eventually. And they had a friend who was in San Francisco, a veteran, and he had a startup. And he was looking for somebody within the military spouse community to help take their app into the installations. And at that time, he was like, hey, you don't seem like you're busy. Is this something you'd be interested in? And I was like, listen, I don't know anything about business. I don't know anything about marketing, but sure. And you'll find, you know, I think through our conversation, military spouses are always up for like, yeah, like what can I learn new? Like what can I get myself into that there might be a future in? And so I said yes to that and really very quickly saw the opportunity for one, being able to take something remote. So that was the first time I had the opportunity. I worked for a Silicon Valley startup. I was able to move and keep my job. And I thought, wow, this is a really cool opportunity, one for just my own professional identity, 2 to have a dual income that I can take with me. I was getting to travel, which I was like, you know, getting to travel with my own job and being able to balance all of that. It was a really cool opportunity. And so the venture capital firm that had funded that organization said, hey, we see what you're doing for this company. Like, could you do this for some of our other companies, like build these little communities and take apps into market with these military spouses that you seem to know around the world? And I was like, sure, again, I'll just say yes and we'll figure it out and we'll build it. Little did I know those were the entrepreneurial spirit pieces that, you know, still drive, I think, to this day. And so I did that for a couple companies and finally realized when one of those customers said to me, he said, military spouses are a force to be reckoned with and more should know about you all. And I just had that moment of, okay, I'm doing this as my own single person in a consulting nature. Like, what would a whole business look like where we could bring these, you know, sides of a marketplace together and bring this amazing talent group into these organizations who don't even know they exist? And so that's where the snowball started falling into place for Instant Teams.
And then, of course, you had Liza here, serial entrepreneur, tech guru, able to come up with all of everything that you guys probably need to actually create more than just a company, but an actual movement. But how did you guys meet? Like, what was that start?
Yeah, well, we were in Virginia together for maybe 4 months at the same time where we crossed paths. We met in an online Facebook group, both of us having babies and trying to get back in shape. So bonded over that area and time in our life, and then realized we were neighbors. She actually lived just a few streets over from me. Met in person maybe twice.
Maybe twice.
Maybe twice. Because a lot of people think we were really good friends that started a company, but we actually didn't really know each other that well. We'd met in person a couple of times. I moved to New York, and you stayed in
We
Virginia?
stayed there for a little bit longer.
Stayed in
Yep.
Virginia a little bit longer. And then that's when she sent me the message of, like, what, 2 years later?
Yeah, yeah. It
So
was
2 years after the fact. Yeah.
What was the message?
It was just a Facebook message. So I think that was the same timeline of me realizing when that one customer had said, more should know about you all. I was like, okay, what does this look like at scale? And Liza was the first person that popped into mind, because at that point, even though it had been 2 years since we lived near each other, she was the only person I had ever met that was kind of in that tech space, in that business forward thinking innovation space. And I was like, so I talked to my husband first. I was like, I have a crazy idea. Like, I want to pitch it to Liza. Like, what should I say? Like, I was so nervous to craft this message. And he was like, yeah, go for it. Like, it sounds amazing. And so it was just a Facebook message. And I think it was basically like, hey, Liza, I have a crazy idea. Like, would you be willing to hop on, a Zoom tomorrow and talk about it? And she was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So we got on a Zoom. And I think by the end of the Zoom, which less than an hour, we were like, yeah, we're going to do this. Like, let's just figure it out. Like, let's do this. And the very next day, started planning what was it going to look like? How are we going to do an MVP? So it was definitely a right moment in time opportunity.
So kind of an instant moment for instant teams.
It was, yeah.
It was an instant moment.
Just wrapped it up.
Yeah, and
in a
she
Zoom
had
call.
some other business things in her, I think, heart and soul brewing, that when I kind of said what my idea was, she was like, oh my gosh, like, I've thought about similar things, or I've done things to kind of maybe prepare us without even knowing that already. So it was really cool.
That's really amazing. And tell me, you said as well, like, you had a remote career, which was good, right?
Yeah.
You had your own business, you had multiple businesses, you were
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
But what did you guys find was this real need in the community? You found that you had the great talent there, but then what is it like, I guess, for military spouses? What did you guys observe?
Well, when I became a spouse myself, I moved 6 times in 7 years. So that's, if you were trying to have a typical career, you can imagine how challenging that would be, right? And so I saw that firsthand, and I was able to keep mine because of how I had set up even prior to becoming a military spouse. But if you got married right out of high school, right out of college, much like Erica did, you didn't have a chance to get your footing before you started doing all that. And so every spouse I would meet would just be like, hey, how are you doing this? And can you help me? And that's when it kind of got in my head. And I built a lot of outsourced teams for my software business. So I was very familiar with that whole process. So when Erica came to me and she's like, hey, I kind of want to do something at scale, I was like, well, I know how to do this with outsourced offshore things. Like, what if we turn this into US based resources, onshore kind of things? Yeah. And I had actually was about to launch another business. I had everything ready to go. It was kind of helping other women launch businesses was the business I was coming up with. But I had told my husband, I'm like, I want to do a business with someone. Everything else I've always done has been solo. And I was like, I'd really like to have a co-founder or a business partner. And then she reached out to me and I'm like, bingo, here's the business partner.
Hey,
I'd rather build something alongside someone now because I've done the things by myself, And so this just became top priority, and I put the other one on the back burner.
Well, no, and it was like fate, a random email or message on Facebook, and you guys do complement each other very well. You're like a community architect, right? And you're like the visionary entrepreneur drive. Like, okay, we're gonna solve these problems with the technology and with the software and everything.
Yep.
That's amazing. But it also is probably very hard to navigate starting everything up from scratch, and you guys weren't even in the same city at the time, right?
Yeah, no, we've never lived in the same place in the 9 years now after that initial Facebook message. We've never lived in the same place.
Wow. And then also you mentioned you have 4 kids, right?
Yes.
And you have
I have two boys.
kids.
Yep.
So moving, multiple kids.
Yep.
Trying to have a career. You didn't have enough challenges thrown at you at one time, did you?
Just make it more complicated and see what we can do.
Which I think that kind of comes to the next part, is that is we always get to is kind of the burn. Like, what was some of those challenges that you guys experienced, trying to navigate and balance all of these different priorities. So I think that's very commendable what you guys have done so far. I'm so glad you guys found each other too.
Yeah.
But
for sure.
I think that's really important. I actually have a really funny story. When I was in college, I was dating an Air Force person, and we were very serious. We were going to get married. and he gave me a military spouse handbook. Now, this was written in the 50s. It still had like the gloves and all this stuff and all of your proper code and what you're supposed to do. And I remember looking at that going, I'm not sure this really fits me. Like it is like a whole commitment on top of that as well. And it's not easy to get lost in. So,
for sure.
So how did you start pulling apart your sides, I guess?
Yeah, I think it was really just giving myself little opportunities to try things. And a lot of that is like communication with my spouse, right? Trust and communication with Liza as we're figuring out, you know, it's almost a new marriage and a new partnership. Like, where is the trust? Where do responsibilities lie? I think just a lot of internal communication with myself, but then also being able to like externalize that and say, okay, in the home, this is what I can handle and this is what I can't handle, which for so long I just didn't, right? I just did it all. It's not a communication style. So those very early days, I think, were a lot about communication within my own home and how things were going to change, because mom wants to build this business. And in order to do that, I'm going to need some help in different ways. But then also figuring out how that relationship worked with Liza as a co-founder.
Yeah. And what about you? I mean, because your journey was a little bit different because you were always a founder, right?
Yeah, I was, and I didn't really identify as a military spouse.
Yeah.
So it makes our combination super unique, I think, when we built the company, because I was always so like business and customer focused. I would go to some of these events I get invited to speak at, and I'd forget to include that I was a military spouse. I'm like, that's the whole reason why I'm in front of this audience. I'm at the USO speaking, and I'm, oh yeah, my husband's active duty. Like, I'd forget that because by default, it just wasn't part of like how I described myself. Right. And, but I think that her position from coming from that as an identity and mine from none actually helped make us like find that middle road. Like, what is the middle road where spouses feel empowered? They're proud of their service members' service, but they have their own identity.
Right.
Right. And so where is that line of how we build the company to where we get both of those pieces? And we were like a good mix of those two things together.
Yeah, you guys relied on each other a lot, which is really also fascinating with having two female founders. That is extremely rare, right? We've talked about it before. I mean, you know, even like with CEOs is like less than 10%. But then talk about founding a business with two female founders and two military spouse female founders. That is like a rarity of rarity. So tell me about those early days. You guys had this purpose, you had this passion. What kind of sacrifices did you make those first couple of years starting this?
Well, one of the ones that I did, so I had my own software company at the time. And so once we got to the point where we have like some product market fit, and we're like, okay, we're going to take this and scale it. Like, this has potential to be a very big business. I knew I couldn't do both. I couldn't do them at the same time. My software business did require a lot of me to run it at that time, because this was a lot of relationship driven business. And so I actually created my own PowerPoint to my husband. And I was like, this is how much money I make now. This is how much money I'm going to make. But I need you to trust me. Give me 6 months and I'm going to get it to here. And if I can't get it to there, I'll pick up a contract or I'll do something on the, you know, I'm always like coming up with things to do. I'm always trying to figure out the next road and path. I was like, I'll pick up something, but I think I can get it here in this amount of time. And this is what I think the potential of this company is, if you'll give me some time.
Wow.
And so I remember very vividly, we were in Virginia, we were sitting on the bed, and I went through the whole PowerPoint, and we got orders to go to Hawaii.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, okay, we just decided we're going to raise money, we're going to scale the company, and I'm going to Hawaii. I'm like, how am I going to raise money from the middle of the ocean?
Exactly. That is really hard.
Yeah.
I mean,
6 hours apart.
6
in
hours
the day-to-day
time zone.
Yeah.
Like, all of that was very challenging in the early days.
I think that was about the time too we gave ourselves our very first paycheck, which I think was like, it's like $437.37, and I remember that very specifically. But
Erica did the bills at that time.
I was
She
the
finance.
payroll. Yeah, that outscaled me very fast. But I remember the system flagging us because we were paying, because it was like, $5 an hour or something for a full-time job. We like got flagged for like an employer issue because we were not paying ourselves enough. And I was like, interesting.
Salary, right? The minimum.
Yeah, but we were really proud of those $400 first checks.
No, it was a huge sacrifice. And then, of course, moving to Hawaii, it's not cheap. I mean, like,
I was going to the most expensive place.
Yeah, but you're not probably, I imagine, wanting to just live that frugal life on a military base.
Yeah.
You were wanting to live in Hawaii correctly, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely not the best of timing, right, with all of it, but it worked out.
So tell me about some of how did you guys get funding? I mean, like, so some of the statistics, and I'll read some of them because I also not sure if it even is right, but only 2% of women, especially two female founders, get part of VC funding. The 171 billion VC funding that is out in the world, 2% are women.
Yeah.
Less than 1% are military spouses. You guys defied both odds, and you did gain 16 million in venture capital funding. How did you do that? How did you know that you were going to get it? And what kind of no's did you get along the way?
Lots of no's. I counted the no's. I led most of the fundraising efforts. I went to, but someone that she met early on in her career doing the consulting was pivotal to us in that moment because he had us go through the Founder Institute program.
Okay.
He was like, if you want to raise money, you need a network. Neither one of us had family or friends that had any money. So we couldn't, that wasn't an option.
Nope.
So we knew we had to figure out like how to get into this. And he's like, you need to build a network. So we went through the Founder Institute program. I graduated that at the same time that we were in Virginia and then got orders to Hawaii, right? And so from that moment, I mean, I had one investor tell me, Liza, I need you to get used to the word failure. And I was like, no. Like, that's just like a fire for me, right? I'm like, well, I'm definitely not failing now. We are closing this round no matter what, right? It's just fuel to me. And so I just knew we would figure it out. I never doubted that we would raise the money. And we started off in smaller rounds. Went to Hawaii, raised from the Hawaii Angels, went through another accelerator program to continue building the network. And I can trace all of that to like the intro we ended up with Tiger Global for our Series A. Was from a micro VC in San Francisco who we met through the Founder Institute program. So that thread just continues, but building the network. And I think one thing we did really well that a lot of founders struggle with is communicate. I communicated with my investors every single month. I told them what we were going to do, what we've accomplished, and how on track we were. And so when I went to raise each next round, I had warm intros from all of them because they knew Liza, they execute on what they say they're going to do. They do it. This is a safer place to put your money. It's never 100%. But I think that had a lot to do with our success and being able to continue to raise additional funding after we finally got the first check, which when I fell into the floor of my office and I was like, oh, thank you. Finally, somebody has given us the first check. But 70 no's to my Series A before we closed the round.
Wow.
I think a really unique piece of that too is, there's kind of that stereotypical assumption of you're going to go on the road for a year and you're going to go hit all the big cities with all the VC firms, and that's the only way you can fundraise. Oh, and you had to have done a friends and family to prove that there's worthiness to your business model, and that was not going to work for us. And we just, and part of those failures was like, well, you'll never be able to do it if you guys can't leave your kids and families behind. And we're like, yeah, well, we're just not going to do it that way, right? We will do it. We're just not going to do it that way.
Right.
So we did all of that 100% remotely. And having that opportunity then, which that timeline kind of collided with COVID, which was a really interesting place to have been in business for 4 years already, building remote teams. But then having to almost one pitch we did, we actually had to help the VC firm figure out how to use Zoom because it was right after COVID happened and all of their investors had never been on the call before, and somehow Liza and I ended up operating the call for them because they didn't know how to use Zoom, and we're like, okay, see, like we're remote, we can do this. This is communication.
Yeah, we're already equipped.
Yeah, we are equipped to do this. So it was a really interesting segue into our pitch at this specific firm, but. Yeah, having done it remotely, I think is, something really special to our journey, and our brand obviously is remote work. But all a part of that, being able to do that as female founders, I think where there's a will, that there's a way.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, at least you two had each other because you were in the party of none.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, that, and she kept the business running so I could concentrate on doing the pitching.
Right.
I would not have been able to do that had she not been picking up the slack and everything else.
Yeah.
Wow. No, that's amazing. How much did your overall purpose, I mean, you're a purpose-driven company, right? I mean, it's not just like, hey, we want to create this business to do this. You really have a purpose-driven company. You saw the need How much did that keep you going during those uncertain times? And how did you guys keep going with 70 no's, being remote, and having, I mean, like very isolated because you guys were, like I said, party of two. So what kept you guys going during that time?
Yeah, I think I've always been a Simon Sinek fan. That start with why was something that I learned even before I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. So like knowing your why and that purpose driven, it is the only reason sometimes you get out of bed, right? There's such a large external accountability when you've put out to the world that you're going to do something great and you're going to make something great and it's going to help people. I think it's that manifestation of like saying it loud, because then on the days when you're like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm not getting out of bed. This is not something I want to do today. You just know that there's so much opportunity and there's still people waiting to be helped, and there's still businesses who haven't yet met this amazing community that we know we're a part of. I think that is the reason through all of that, and even, still each and every day that we're like, okay, yeah, like we're still driving forward because we're not done yet. And we know that there's a lot of impact to be made still.
Well, and you guys have done so much since then. I mean, so many awards, like top of Inc. 5000. You guys were in the top 200, which is amazing. EY Entrepreneur of the Year. I know that you guys, let's see, you had a hackathon. You were part of the first military spouse hackathon, and then you were part of the DoD pitch program or something like that, right? What was that?
Yeah, we actually, before we even did fundraising, we won 2 different pitch competitions within like a 3-month period. I think the total was like about $25,000. So it was pretty substantial, that helped us build towards that first MVP. And so, yeah, we did that at different military or veteran type entrepreneurship programs. One was military, one was local in Hampton Roads where we lived. And those were an amazing opportunity just to get some cash where we knew we could put behind the software, we hired our very first employee. Paid her more than our $437 a month. And that's where we started. That really gave us that boost. And winning those pitch competitions was kind of our, the next level past bootstrapping of our own money was that kind of big injection of cash.
Yeah, and you've also been recognized for the military for what your purpose has been and what you've done. I know that you received an award. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, it's a very special award that the Army Aviation specifically gives to a select number of military spouses, often at a service member's retirement ceremony. So my husband retired 2 years ago, and I was super surprised to get the Order of the Lady of Laredo. And so that's basically just recognition of, service to the military community throughout the active duty service members' time. But also got just special recognition for, being able to build instant teams. And Liza was there at the ceremony, so that was kind of fun. But yeah, just really a special opportunity for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just want to thank you guys again. I mean, I know it's kind of been a challenge, and somehow you guys just kept pushing through with not accepting failure as an option and realizing your purpose. And I mean, look at where you guys have gone, but I know that it has not been without a lot of sacrifices on both of your parts. So for our audience and stuff, tell us exactly what Instant Teams is, what it does, how you're helping the military.
Great. Instant Teams is a customer experience talent marketplace. And what that means is we build teams for companies and brands with military spouses in customer experience roles. And we do that in 2 different ways. We are a complete outsourced provider, so providing onshore US-based resources for companies 24/7 with a global workforce that are all US citizens. And then we'd have a job board where brands can put their open positions on there. It feeds straight into their ATS system, so it's integrated to technology. Because there's over 12 million active duty and veteran spouses. So we know we can't ourselves employ every single one of them. And so how do we open that up to brands? So the job board is our product to help do that. And the last thing we do is brand experiences. So we host over 75 events a year for military spouses across the globe.
Wow.
And we have brands that come in and want to interface with the spouses, want to build the relationships. It further reinforces the job board participation, the outsourcing of the companies. And so we can work in those 3 different ways throughout a brand's life cycle, but then that generates those jobs and that income to our military families.
That's amazing. I mean, just truly amazing. And all of your 12 million that are available for the job board are verified that they are true active duty military spouses.
Yes, we do have a verified app for military spouses, which is the only one that currently exists.
That's amazing. I mean, and such a good need, and also bringing jobs back home. I know that's a huge part, and with it being customer service based, I mean, I think we all much rather prefer talking to one of your lovely spouses, male and female, but
Yes.
one of them versus, a bot, right? So this leads us to one of my favorite segments, which is the burning question. So in a nation that really celebrates its military and understands it's important, there's a whole force behind that is just suffering in silence. I mean, we've already talked about, their professional aspirations out the door, but then also financially suffering and the wellness of it. I want to read off some of these statistics because I think it's unbelievable. So we're talking about our 12 million active duty spouses. So first of all, 81% of military families experience a PCS every 2 to 3 years, permanent change of station. So 81% every 2 years, they're moving somewhere across the country, right? Brand new place, restart. 20 to 24% unemployment of military spouses. That is 5 times the national average. I mean, 5 times the national average. 84% have some form of college education with over 15% advanced degrees. And 35% must relicense every move. Like you think about nurses and you think about educators and all of that. They have to get relicensed every 2 years in a whole new state. And then 31% are underemployed because of that, working as in cafes versus working in their profession. This one is the one that really kills me. The average pay for a military spouse is 38% lower than their civilian counterparts, which is astronomical. 67% can't secure childcare. And this part is really staggering. 1 in 5 active duty members cite career frustrations of their spouse as the reason for leaving service. I mean, 1 in 5. That's a huge statistic. I mean, this isn't just a personal struggle. It's really a national crisis, and it's really talking about our military readiness, right? So the question is, how can we as a nation, from the Congress to the corporate boardrooms, really turn this highly skilled mobile talent into a strategic advantage versus a readiness issue?
Yeah, we have our work cut out for us, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
those
wow.
are really powerful, I think, vulnerabilities to show, one, the need, but also the potential to come together for solutions, right?
Right.
Like we know we're building this organization. We know that we can make a lot of impact, but we will not solve military spouse unemployment ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of the time that we have taken to be a part of, whether it's lobbying or different, legislation going out. I think a really interesting one is that a lot of organizations they don't have enough military spouses in their purview to really pay attention to, one, what the benefit to them as a corporation could be, but also how they can get involved and how they can actually make really big impact there. So we're always committed to showing the talent, right? We know we have people who can solve problems. We have people who have crisis, solving skills that a lot of civilian members don't have just by nature of our lifestyle. And those are huge opportunities to be advocates for customers in the CX space and all of these extra soft skills that people bring in. So we are loud and proud about those soft skills as a brand at Instant Teams, but also some of those kind of like hard knocker of, legislation. A lot of interesting things out there. There's something called the WOTC, which is the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. And that currently involves veterans. And so there's been probably almost a decade of years at this point trying to get military spouses added on to that so that there's an extra incentive for organizations to hire military spouses, just like there are veterans. And so there's just interesting things, taking the time to learn those on how other organizations can advocate, whether you're hiring directly or not. There are things that people can get involved in at those levels.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's where it is. It's like serving in silence. When you're a military spouse, you're really signing up for the military as well.
Yeah.
And yet you're not getting any of the benefits of it, right? It's actually the opposite. You're getting penalized almost, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what other, orders? I know that you were part of an executive order. You got to sign it at the White House or go witness it.
Yes.
So
They came down to Fort Bragg.
Spouse employment. So tell me about that one. What is that for?
So the president came down to Fort Bragg and signed it there with his wife. Jill Biden was there as well. So it was an honor to witness that and see that. It's a good step forward in the change. But I think tacking on to what Erica said, there's several states that have passed legislation already that allows for you to hire military spouses like they're a protected class, like you can a veteran. Like you can actually go in your talent pipeline and hire a veteran just because they're a veteran.
Right.
You cannot do that for military spouses. So even as a military spouse focused, mission-driven company, we have to be an equal opportunity employer. We can't just hire a military spouse because they're a military spouse, so we can't put them at the top of the funnel. So what we did was build our marketing engine to the spouses so that most of them are in our funnels, so that's the talent that you're getting from. But how much more effective could we be if that law got passed?
Exactly.
So there's a few states that have it, but if we could get that adopted across all of the states, that could be game changing for us and for other corporations, because now they can put them at the top of the list and they can make sure and they can count and make sure they're being effective in their hiring strategies. So that would go a long way for us from a policy perspective.
No, that would be. I mean, that'd be huge because, like I said, they are serving in silence. You know, they're part of the same military, but then zero of the benefits. And then tell me a little bit about also on the corporate side, what we can do. Because you're right. I mean, think about even project management. I mean, if you move every 2 years with a family and businesses, I'm sure you probably can put together some projects very well. And they're highly educated. So customer service, excellent, you know, part for talking about bringing jobs back to America. But what is like corporations? What should they know? What can you dispel about military spouses and to make them seek that out?
Yeah, we actually just created a first playbook of its kind at Instant Teams, where we have talked directly to a kind of a mixed group of HR, marketing, hiring teams, just around, you know, working with Instant Teams, we bring the talent to you, right? That problem solved. But internally, as a corporation, as an organization, what are those things for your own employee experience, like that you should know? What are the acronyms that you should be aware of? What are the different types of programming that you can build internally? So anytime I think that you can think of the military spouse community as a specific group that has different unique needs, but also the payout of that is highly skilled who will change the course of your organization, those are worthy of sitting down and having those kind of corporate conversations about. So some examples like specific ERG groups for military spouses, making your brand culture at your company something that military spouses feel okay self-identifying. But we find a lot of companies that, one, either there's not an opportunity to check a box like, oh, I'm a military spouse of a service member. And sometimes spouses just don't self-identify because of the historics of, you know, generations of being, you know, having stereotypes and that being used as a bias. So thinking through those things corporately, we have one company that we work with that actually built a special PCS policy. So they have a special additional policy if a military spouse is moving and they're a W-2, they get some extra leave extension or an opportunity to feel free to say, I'm about to move across the country. I don't want to lose my job. I'm not afraid of losing my job because you've already, you know, assured me that it's there. But having that little bit of leeway and open communication. So like that creative innovation of employee experience can really move the needle for companies for sure.
Because I mean, in the military or veterans or reserves, they get all of those benefits, right? With the time off, but then their spouses do not. And then, you know, let's also talk about remote work. I mean, that's a hot topic anyways, right? You know, it's some companies are saying, no, you have to be in the office. And then some are, you know, doing hybrid, but talk about remote work and how that can help get this extra talent. And like I said, bring some stuff on shore that we don't have.
I think from the very beginning, I mean, we were remote from the very first because we knew that spouses, they want to keep their jobs when they move. And so what we didn't really think about was on the customer experience side, the turnover is so high in that industry that when you have a dedicated resource, you don't want to lose them, right? Because you're doing 30, 40% churn. You know, ours is less than 8%, right?
Wow.
Because the spouses, once they get the job, they do not want to start over, right? It's the one thing that can stay with them as they move if it's remote, right? And there are a lot of things that fit into that category that can be done fully remote completely. There are some things you may want in person in the office. You know, you may want some leadership or some different things in office, and that's okay. So we're not saying remote is the only way to go, but most roles, most jobs can be done remotely. And if there's a will, there's a way to kind of figure it out when you have somebody who is amazing working for you. If they don't fit exactly into this role that's not remote anymore and there is another place for them for sure. So being open to finding that. The other thing I would tack on to like misdemeanors that corporations sometimes say is like they think, oh, well, all spouses just want a part-time job, or they all just want like, time in the afternoons or in the mornings off and things like that. And it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
You have spouses of all ages, all demographics, all different types of skill sets. You have people with PhDs and you have people coming out of high school, right? So it is not a one size fits all in your corporation. So think about your military spouse programs in one lane. You're missing a whole opportunity there.
Yeah, you are. I mean, because it is very different from somebody that's like career military that has a set path.
Right.
These are their spouses that are very, very different.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's just a lot, just getting the awareness out, right?
Yep.
So if you could put a billboard up that had one line that would champion your cause or get the world or get America to think about it, what would you say?
Oh man, we've done so many taglines and slogans over the year. The one that I really like is skilled enough to stand out. And that has always been one that kind of like is near and dear to my heart, because I think it is that skill set. It's the skill sets that people bring, hard or soft, right into organizations. It's why we're skill-based hiring, that recognition of an individual coming into an organization and being able to contribute that is beneficial to both. It's the skills that are at the core of that.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the soft skills, like I
Yep.
said, you guys have had different types of experiences.
Yep.
And, not just what you've learned on the work side, but everything
Yep.
else that you bring to it, and that dedication. An 8% turnover, that's really
Yep.
unheard of. I mean, very loyal, very dedicated
Yep.
staff. So, no, I thank you for that. And I think that, like I said, just getting the word out that they are, this amazing work group that want to work. This is more
Yes.
than it
Yes.
is about just getting them a job.
Correct.
It's about
Right.
dignity,
Yeah.
right? Having their own individual purpose and not being shuffled around like a piece of furniture that's getting moved from one place to another, but having their dignity, having their jobs, and having their own path, right?
Yep.
So I think that's
100%.
a great path that you guys have made for them. So leadership requires fuel. And this section here, this section of Spark Sessions has actually become one of my favorite ones because we've gotten so much insight. And it's not selfish. It's really about your personal journeys. What fans your flames? I mean, you guys are leading such a purpose-driven life. You talk about everything from legislation to business. How do you guys stay grounded and keep that fuel? Because I think someone else is out there listening, and your ideas might become their ideas of someone that's out struggling. So give me some of your self-care or rituals or mantras.
Yeah, I can say over the course of 9 years, I haven't always done great at it. And that's the truth, right? And I think that's the vulnerability of you're going to have ups and downs, especially as an entrepreneur doing everything. It's going to happen. And I think it's being aware. You become acutely aware of those ups and downs that are not necessarily, they can be connected to ups and downs of business, but sometimes business might be doing great. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm not, right?
Yeah.
What is going on? I think something that Liza taught me very early on is that there is balance doesn't exist, right? It's
Right.
it's this pursuit of something that doesn't exist. I'm a very visual learner and thinker. And so I've always thought of all the things I do almost like a building block, like an IKEA system of some sort, where I have all these priorities, and some days, something might move up and it's a priority for the next hour, and then the kids can come back up and they can be the priority. So for me, that's just been a visual kind of structure that has helped me not balance, because I know you can't balance, right? You
Right.
can't have 20 priorities at the same time. And those moments when you start to kind of feel that panic or that burnout, that's usually what you're trying to do, is balance all of those things. So more of a mental visual of a modular system, which is very strange, but that's helped me. And just for fun, I've gotten into thrift shopping. There is something about the immediate gratification of just finding that one label or finding a brand. I've done it where I make Liza boxes.
Yeah, it's great.
And so that's it's mindless. I can just go rack by rack. I can find designer things. I think it's that when you're an entrepreneur, you don't get wins sometimes. It's
Yeah.
this very long haul of wins. And so whether it's flipping furniture or thrift shopping, it's those quick little immediate wins. It's just something really soothing, I think, for me mentally.
And shopping therapy is always
Yeah,
good.
it is.
Let's not lie. No, I like that. And then also being authentic. Like I said, we're not always good at it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think you're right. There is no balance. Everybody's always asked, how do you
Yeah.
balance this and this? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you don't. You do to
Yeah.
some extent. So
Right.
what about you? How do
Yeah.
you recharge?
It made me think of I had to let go of certain ideas of myself when I have young kids, and you go into school and there's a mom there and she's made like all these homemade things, and she came and you forgot that you were even supposed to be there and you're late and you don't have anything. And then I'm like, I'm never going to be that.
Yeah.
That's just not who I am. And it's okay. I don't have to be that. And that is who she is. And that's amazing for her because, and there's nothing to take away from either one of us. And so I had to learn that
Very
early
true.
on and not get down on myself to be like, oh, well, I'm failing a little bit as a mom because I'm not as involved. But then my girls now look at me and they're like, my mom's the CEO, and they Google me in class, which is super embarrassing. I'm like, please stop doing that because you can find me on the internet. And they think that's just the funnest thing ever, right? But different examples setting different things, and I had to let go of that idea that I'm not going to be great at everything, right? I have to pick the things I want to be great at, the things I'm okay at, and the things that just fall off. And so I had to learn kind of that order, and it took a while. It's a process, and I'd say about 2 years ago, I kind of hit my wall and was like, okay, I am not feeling that good. Like, I'm not taking care of myself right. Like, I've just been running, and I'm not feeling myself. And so I started really concentrating on my health and seeing a functional doctor and making sure that I have all the vitamins and I'm very high maintenance these days. What I tell everybody, my routine is very regimented. Working out every single day in some form. I take walks, I go to the gym and lift weights a couple of days a week. And I'm very, very guarded on that time, where I used to be like, I'll fit it in if I can. Now it's priority for me. So I have a very structured part of how I start my days, just to keep myself on the treadmill, right?
Right, but I think that's important. We actually have a functional doctor coming on next week that I'm interviewing, and I love her. I mean, talk about holistic, but it's important. You have to be a little selfish sometimes.
Yep. Yeah.
You have to say, okay, here's what I need, and put those in. And also acceptance. My kids are forever traumatized because if it was Blue Day, they were wearing red because I never got the memo out of their backpack. And they just learned that mommy is a different type of mommy, and I'm very good at what I do as far as very caring and throw great parties, but I am not good with those other things at all. And that's okay.
It's okay.
Right? It's okay. I think acceptance and finding your own self-care ritual and taking care of yourself is extremely important. And being honest with it, I think that's the most important thing that we can do. And realize it's perfectly fine.
I think that's been a value of our co-foundership too, is we try not to be down at the same time. Sure. If, and I think we've never been like, okay, you can't be down because I'm down. That's never happened. It's just also been this really great balance between the two of us of hey, founder moment, we'll kind of caveat that sometimes in conversations, hey, this is just a founder moment. I need a break, or I need a day, or things aren't going well at home with, X, Y, and Z. Because we all have things that are going on in homes right outside of the chaos of business. So again, that communication thread, I think, is whether you're in business alone or with those around you, even if they're not in the business, being able to say that and to ask for help and to be able to have those conversations is huge.
I think that is huge. And I think almost every single person that has answered that question, almost all of them, they have somebody that they're talking to. And I think women in general, we are a community. We like to speak things out. And sometimes it's you're not looking for advice. Sometimes you just want to have somebody you can, just kind of the whole reason why Spark Sessions exist is a community of saying, one, yes, you're okay. And two, just being able to say, hey, I'm having a moment and I just need to talk about it. So I love that with both of those. Any music that you guys listen to that also helps soothe you when you're having kids running all around and all these other demands, and then a business that you're trying to go get no answers for all day?
I have a very split personality.
That's what I was going to say,
It's either total silence in the car, heavy metal, rap music, praise and worship, or country. And it depends on what it is I need in that moment. And it switches. And sometimes my playlist is one after the other, and we just go back and forth. So, but I love music. I was actually a music major before I switched to computer science. So music is definitely an outlet for me.
Yeah, I always say if I can go from a good rage against the machine session to some gospel like within a day, then I'm doing well. So like it's just that like sometimes your emotions move moment by moment, and having whatever is accessible to kind of help manifest those, you got to change it up.
I love that. I love that. And I love all of your different tips of what you guys have. So again, if you guys stop tomorrow, you guys have already built a legacy, I believe. And so I think, but you guys continue to push forward. Thank you. But so now we get to the most important part of Spark Sessions, which is really what it's all about passing the torch. So what are some things that you want to say to the military spouses coming after you, or something to help the next generation, to learn and to grow from?
Yeah, I think Liza and I found out really early on as military spouses that the community is incredible, right? That is what has allowed us to grow. That is what has allowed us to have a mission that continues to drive. But they're also, especially in entrepreneurship, can be a little bit of a bubble or a cap. And so looking outside of that and not being fearful of the unknown, I think is one, a key to any entrepreneurship journey, right? Is like trying new things, doing things that scare you. I think sometimes the lifestyle of military life can be so stressful and so unknown. Like the last thing that you want to do is take another step or take another unknown that's really kind of you out on your own. But that is the way that I have seen in the past 2 decades plus of being a military spouse, that problems are being solved for the military spouse community. It's military spouses stepping up and realizing that, the government is, the military is funded by the government for a very specific reason. And sometimes the solutions that we want to see coming for the community are not going to come from that. They're going to come from the privatized sector. They're going to come from individuals stepping up and building solutions. So I think realizing that and knowing that you are fully empowered and you don't have to ask for permission. I think sometimes we've also had to learn, people are like, well, aren't you concerned that somebody's going to, say something that, you're not showing up and doing the volunteer role that your spouse needs you to do. And I'm like, no, I'm his retirement plan. Like, this is our family's future. And we have to think about ourselves as a family unit outside of the military, because you're not always going to be military. So thinking that through, that pathway through, and sometimes not what's right in front of you, and not being afraid to step out of that.
Stepping out of the boundaries and having a voice, I think is some of the very important. What about with you? What do you hope to pass off to the next generation, or what would you say to yourself if you were younger?
I would say lots of things to myself if I was younger. But I think it's much easier to look back and think, oh, I would have done this different, or I would have, but it's all part of the learning experience. One of my favorite sayings of Erica's, actually, she would say, as military spouses, we don't belong anywhere, so we belong everywhere.
Oh, I like that.
And we carried that as business owners. We would invite ourselves to the programs that were for veterans, and we'd be like, we're military spouses. We just showed up, and they're like, we're so glad you're here. We didn't even think about like putting your name. We want you here. It is inclusive, right? But sometimes you don't know that. And as a military spouse, I think they tend to they default to like, it's not for me. And we defaulted to, we're just going to show up. And if they tell us we can't be there, we'll just leave, right? We just can't be there. And so inviting yourself to have a seat at the table, because a lot of times you are the only blocker to the table and you think you haven't been invited, right? But the other people around the table weren't invited either. They just showed up. Yeah. And so teaching yourself, you just show up. What is the worst thing that can happen? Somebody says no. Somebody tells you, you can't be there or whatever. Like, I've just carried that through our whole entrepreneur journey. Like, I just belong no matter what. And until somebody tells me that I don't, right? So show up.
Yeah. The answer is always no if you don't ask, right?
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. What about the 12 million plus? What is that community? What is that going to, where is that going? What can you tell them as far as future?
So the community aspect of Instant Teams has actually always been there from day one. And I think people think you start a business, you have a customer, you make some money and it grows from there, which we did do, but we actually launched to the military spouse community before we ever had a customer. And so that community pillar has been where we have grown, and it's what has allowed us to have that continued cycle and that flywheel of all of these opportunities and products and business, has because community has been that core foundation. So that's taken on different versions over the past years. And so 2 years ago, we launched a military spouse community app. It's verified, and we called it 12 Million Plus. Since this year, we've actually incorporated that back into the just Instant Teams brand as itself, because that community is so strong and it is so powerful. And that's what the 75 events that we're hosting. So it will continue to be a pillar of Instant Teams, and it continues to be something that is our base, but is also that goal. And so everything that we do between our business models is built around that, and it will just continue to scale. It puts us in front of the community. It brings new brand opportunities. And, I think people are always interested in the fact that, like, oh, you launched to a community before you launched to customers. And we're like, we knew that we had to build that trust within the community first.
Right, and giving something back to that community.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So what do you hope your kids think about you? You talked a little bit about it, but what knowledge are you passing on to them?
Well, when I was little, my dad used to sing me this song, and it was like, Liza Marie, what do you think you're going to be? Maybe a doctor, maybe a lawyer. And he'd play it on his guitar, and he played it for me all the time. He played for all my sisters, but I really remembered it. And so when I went out to do stuff, I just automatically thought, I had the confidence, right? What am I going to be? What am I going to do? I had no idea it was going to be CEO, right? And founder of companies and doing this kind of stuff. So I want that. Now that I've been able to accomplish what I have, I want my children to see that and think, sky's the limit. I can do whatever it is I want to do, no matter how little or how big it is, right? To understand that whatever path makes you happy and makes you feel whole, like that is the path to go down. And for me, that's the business side.
Yeah, and I'd say the quote that she said, we don't belong anywhere, therefore we belong everywhere. As military kids, right? My 19-year-old had been to 8 schools by 11th grade. And so that ability to, again, ground yourself, find new friends, find out what your purpose is, like that cycle through their lives as military kids, that quote has always been kind of that grounding point. Mm-hmm. Because in that chaos and in those moves, you really get to find out who you are quicker, I think, than most people. And I always tell my husband that that's been, not a lot of benefits of being a military spouse for 22 years, but that is definitely an advantage that I have had. And something I'm thankful of is that reinvention of self over and over again, and being able to find what you're good at and what you're not, and just to continue to add that. My kids have been able to see that that's how we've grown the business. That's how we've grown our marriage between my spouse and I. That's how we've grown businesses, just being able to replicate that over and over again and never feel afraid of like where you are in the moment, even if it's unknown.
That's great. And then how are you building the rungs for the next military spouses that come up?
Yeah, we've been involved in a lot of things over the years, different military spouse entrepreneur programs. Mm-hmm. To me, very much at the core of our business model is the duality of financial income for military spouses. Like the stories that we hear of, oh, we got to go on to Disney for the first time as a family because we had a second income that allowed us to plan for that. Or we got to apply for a mortgage with my income this time, and we've never been able to do that before. It's those things that the little tiny legacies at an individual level, but that's what grows an entire community of military to be better off financially and leave a legacy then for their families. So it's those little building blocks of things that we see day to day in the business.
Those ripples
Yep.
ripples are
Yep.
the most important.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all of that. You guys really are truly building a legacy and impacting, like you said, not just this generation, but multiple generations
Yep.
to come after that. Thank you. Okay, so now for a little bit of spark joy in our fun section called the rapid fire round. Okay, so super simple questions. Answer each or together or whatever, depending on each one's. But first thing comes to your head. Okay. All right. Boldest decisions you ever made as co-founders.
I think fundraising was a pretty bold decision. You can go many ways with business. I think that was a pretty bold one.
Yeah. We also concentrated on customer experience as a narrowed lane, and that really changed the trajectory of our fundraising.
Yeah, that was scary. That was bold.
Yep.
Very scary, very bold, but worked out, right?
Yep.
All right, Liza, your leadership superpower.
I think it's to always see the big picture. When everyone's talking, I can put things into that big picture quickly.
Erica?
I would say I'm the executor to the vision. So really being able to understand the vision quickly and kind of distill, okay, what are the next steps and how do we need to get the team behind it and that change management aspect.
Okay, this one you guys are probably going to argue on. If instant teams had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know.
You guys already have different taste in music.
I know.
Oh, that's a hard one.
It's a hard one. I don't know. It depends on the day.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer to that one.
Okay. All right. One word that sums up your co-founder's dynamic. So what would you say is Erica? One word to
sum up her?
up. Yeah.
Emotionally intelligent.
And you, Liza?
Focused.
Favorite PCS location?
Monterey, California.
Probably Destin, Florida.
So that's a nice one too. First thing you unpack that makes you feel like you're at home?
The coffee pot, 100% every time.
My bedding. My bed.
And favorite instant team event that you guys do?
That's a good question. So we just did our second annual paintball event, and we had 200 plus military spouses out playing paintball. And so that's one of the annual events that we do. And it's just a really cool way to get people out of the house and connecting and having people, we talked about like going past fear and the unknown, people just showing up because they trust the brand. Those have been really fun to see grow over the years.
Yep.
And last question, coffee, tea, or cocktails?
Coffee.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so now we're wrapping up, and it's going to be the last question that we ask every single guest. So we end every episode with kind of where that passion meets a purpose, and both of you guys are very exemplary of that. But what is that one spark, that one truth about each of you that keeps you going?
Yeah, I think we've mentioned a couple times the quote, we don't belong anywhere, therefore we belong everywhere. And really deeply internally, and for me, that was discovering through several years of life coaching. As an introvert, I don't feel like I belong everywhere. And I do like to be behind the scenes, and I have a lot of strong thoughts and ideas, but sometimes putting those out to the world can be scary. And so being able to have learned how to embrace that my ideas are not meant for me. The ideas are meant for the community around me and the people around me, and that each individual has that opportunity within them, and to let those come out and adopting that and doing that every single day over and over and over again, and seeing the outcome of that. Once you do that, it's completely empowering, and that's definitely what keeps me going every day.
Liza, what is your one truth? What is that one thing that keeps you going?
So there's a song called The Truth, and there's a line in there that says, I know who I am because I know who you are, and I'm a very faith-based person, and being a CEO is hard, right? And not everybody is happy with everything that you do and all your decisions, right? But that one grounding piece for me is like, I know that I'm doing things from a good place, from a place of care, concern, and empathy and love. And so I can go back to that one truth myself, even if I'm not getting that feedback from others at the time. And that's what kind of keeps me grounded.
That's really beautiful. Very beautiful. And I want to thank both of you guys for being here today. I mean, you are both amazing. I love everything that you guys are doing. And I think that you guys are going to have so much success. And we just want to get the word out to everybody, to, like I said, Congress, corporate boardrooms, the rest of the military spouses, that they're not alone. They're not forgotten. They do belong everywhere, which is, I think, a beautiful sentiment to have and to be recognized.
Yes.
So thank you both for joining us. It's been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. We're honored to be here with you.
Well, the honor is entirely ours. Thank you for tuning in to Spark Sessions. Until next time, keep the fire burning.